It's Devin with MVP Sport Fishing and Real Action Charters. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about some of my pet peeves and some other things that are on my do not do these list. I see them all the time when I'm watching videos or with people, and they just don't make a whole lot of sense to do. But before I get into that, I've had a bunch of positive feedback on my videos so far. The one thing that people thought I could do better was my background. I've been in my child's room with a blank closet door as my background. I thought the lighting was the best in there. The lighting's tough in here. I got two big windows on either side. This is my living room, but I think I got the light blocked a little bit, the best I can, and so now we have at least a fishing type background. And let me know what you think, if it's better than the last one. So this first one here is just something that I kind of grew up with. I've heard it from my family and other places, but it's something that nobody does. If you turn your headlights off when you're launching, if you're a trailerable boat guy, you don't need your headlights on to back up. All the launches are lit these days. You can see what you're doing. As soon as you back up and you leave your headlights on and sit at the ramp, we have enough problems at the ramp, and people have enough problems backing up. If they can't see in their mirrors because your headlights are right in their eyes, it only helps if you turn them off, just kind of a PSA thing, but you don't have to agree with that. You don't have to agree with any of this. That was the random one. Now let's talk some more about the actual fishing stuff. And I'm going to kind of go through a list of, starting my day and going through the process. So one thing is, I never personally want to set up trolling into the wind. I have the opportunity to fish on a bunch of big boats too when I'm doing charters with Real Action. So a lot of the times I do set up trolling into the wind, but all this is dependent on your boat size and your people aboard and how many people you have that actually know what's going on, if you can manage driving and setting lines and all the rest. But everything is harder trolling into the wind. And it's also harder if you're a charter boat with clients, because now they've just got out on the lake and they're trying to get accustomed to what's going on. And now you're going into the wind, into the waves, and we all know that it's harder to do everything going into the wind. If I was solely fishing in my personal boat, a 20-foot aluminum boat, I would probably lead the entire lake in percentage of time trolling with the wind. In the 3 tournaments that I won this year, I never once trolled into the wind. I always trolled with the waves, except for the 0.2 of a mile circles we did around the harbor in Frankfurt for a while. Other than that, my boat went with the wind every single day of all those tournaments. So let's jump into one about flasher flies. So this is definitely a pet peeve of mine, and you can ask my first mate who fishes with me the most, Grant. If he throws the flasher fly out and cannot look me in the eyes and tell me that he checked the hook and that it's not crooked, I will make him reel it back in and fix it, and or at least look at it. I see people just kind of throw the flasher out there and just assume it's right. Obviously, you want that hook to be perfectly straight down the line. What happens is when you catch a fish a lot of times and get it unhooked, by the time you're done, your knot's over on the side and your hook looks like that. Well, it'd be hard to see here, but when you put it in the fly, if I turn it around like that, well, then your hook's all crooked. Now, does that make any bit of difference? I don't know, but it's one of those super easy things to control. Like if fish comes and hits that, and now my hook is crooked off to the side, is he going to get hooked better or worse? In my mind, I think it's worse. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's one of those super easy things to control. And that is a really big pet peeve of mine. Just look your stuff over before you throw it back in the water and get it to fish again. Another one is when you're letting your divers out, let it out with the drag and not free spool. So this is especially important if you're running double divers. Your outside diver, if you let that thing out just free spool, it's not going to plane out to the side and get the space you need away from your inside diver. You're going to get tangles, and it's just not going to be functional because of that. It also, if the current is bad, when you let it free spool out, I've had it where the diver actually twists, so your line coming off the back and your line coming from the front, because there's no tension pulling it one way or the other. It's just basically sinking. will twist around itself, and then either you get a fish on and the diver doesn't release, or when you go to reel it in, you can't release the diver because you can't put enough tension on it because those two lines are twisted. And if it's wire, that's bad. You can saw your own stuff off. The other thing is with divers is, and I should have brought a reel up here, but I didn't, is when I get bit on a diver, the first thing that I'm going to do is loosen the drag. Like as I go to reach for it and pull it out of the holder, the first thing I'm going to do with this hand is I'm going to spin that drag just a little bit back so that line comes out easy. You know that when fish hit divers, it's aggressive, that the rod's bucking pretty good. You know, you don't want to rip that hole in their face any bigger initially than you have to. Obviously, the more pressure you put on it, the bigger that hole is going to be eventually, and the longer he's on the line, the easier chance he has to get off. You don't want to like just free spool it when you get a bite, but I think it helps to loosen it a little bit, get that line coming out, so then he can make that run and tire himself out. The other thing that is similar to that is downriggers. I see a lot of guys, they run to the downrigger and they grab it and they either try to jerk it right away, or you know, just that extra time of reaching out over the side to grab the downrigger and then reel. If you can just leave it in the holder and reel till that thing gets super tight and then drag starts coming out, now you've got that slack out of there in the quickest way possible. So essentially your line's going, we're going to pretend it's a 45. I know there's blowback, so it's not quite a 45. Or a 90, sorry. A 90 degree angle going back. Well, when a fish hits this and pulls it back, it releases. So now you have all of this area of slack. The fastest way to get that out is to reel right away. The longer it sits there and slowly comes up, the more that fish has slack, and the easier it's going to be for him to get off, because there hasn't been a good hook set on that. A rigger is the only pole that really doesn't get that initial hook set right away by itself. It doesn't get it until that line becomes tight, unless you have your rigger release super, super tight. But I don't think that's the case for most people. So just try to keep that in mind. What else do we have here? Pumping the rod is a big one for me. I see people really aggressively pumping the rod, and a lot of times they'll do it when you don't have to, and we try to get people to not do this on charters, but they see it everywhere and it's just kind of a habit. A lot of times you can just reel and gain line without pumping the rod on a medium to small sized fish, especially. Or obviously sometimes you need to use the rod as leverage. I try to get people to do what we call the salmon shuffle, basically slowly walk backwards and then reel as you walk back to the back of the boat. So you're walking backwards to the front of the boat and then reeling as you walk towards the back of the boat. And you can do that on a small boat. I have a 20-foot aluminum boat. I do that there just as well as I do it on our big 40, 48 footers too. Obviously there's a little more room on our big ones. You can get more per time you do it, but it works as effectively on any size boat. The main thing when you're doing that and or pumping the rod is that I see a lot of people want to pump the rod, you know, like pretty aggressively, sometimes even losing drag while they're pumping it, and then kind of lowering it and then start to reel. But you've really done nothing besides pull that fish forward, rip a bigger hole in his face, give him slack, and then start to reel. If you keep that, the only way I've been able to explain this to people is keep the same exact bend in the rod. Your rod should have the same bend the entire time you're either doing the quote-unquote salmon shuffle or pumping. Either you can pull it back and reel down, pull it back, reel down, have the same bend in the rod, then you're not basically pulling him forward, ripping a hole in his face and giving him slack. I see a lot of people, they pull and the rod goes way back and then they let down and then they bend it back over because then they start to reel. I know that's hard to explain once we were able to get out on the water, on the lake, and I'll make a few more of these videos, but that's what I'm trying to get at here just with words. I know it's tough. In that same sense, it is not debatable to me that women will catch more than guys will. I see it every day on our charters. They more apt to take it easy. This isn't a power sport. People think they want to power it in. Yes, you have to be a little bit more aggressive on them than a walleye, but they take it easy on them, and they actually take advice a lot better than we do, as much as I don't want to admit that. As that fish gets closer, then what I like to do and see happen is if that fish, and this is all going to be backwards because I'm going to point to my left, which is over here, but it's going to be your right. But that fish is coming in off to the left as I'm looking out the back of the boat. So I'm looking out the back of the boat. Fish is coming into the left. I don't want the guy reeling in the fish to be over in the left-hand corner because then we can't do anything. It doesn't do any good. He's not able to, he loses a little bit of leverage trying to pull it back to the right. Also, the guy that needs to net the fish now can't get in there. It doesn't do you any good if the guy trying to net the fish is standing behind the guy with the rod. It also doesn't do you any good if the guy trying to net the fish is on the opposite side of the fish as the guy with the rod. So basically you have the fish off to the left, the guy with the rod in the middle, and the guy netting over on the right side. That doesn't make any sense to me. And there is, I don't think, any debating that. But so if you try to get the guy with the rod over in the middle, and you could actually get the guy with the net over in the left corner, and he can stick that net out. This is something that I don't see anywhere. He can stick that net out and push on the line, and that basically helps pull that fish over. The fish loses leverage and you gain more leverage. That's something that with words I don't really know how to describe any better than that. Once we get out on the water, I will definitely be making a video to show that a little bit, but it basically all comes back to leverage. And that leads me into my last point, that is maybe my number one pet peeve when I see other people fishing or YouTube videos or whatever. I think this comes from walleye fishing, but people like to back up way too soon. They'll have 20 feet of line out there, 10, 15, 20 feet of line out there, and they just want to walk towards the back of the boat with the rod way up in the air. And now they can't see the fish. They can't help the guy netting, and they always are like, oh, did you get him? Well, it doesn't make any sense to do that. You should just keep reeling and get that fish as close to the tip of the rod as you can. The only way however far you need to back up is only however far your rod is. If you get that rod tip over the guy that's netting shoulder, so if I'm netting and that rod tip is right here, that's all the further you need to back up. Now there's 4 feet of line out and I can net it. Bang, it's done, it's over. That fish loses all the leverage. The exception to this now is obviously anything on a diver. We all run different leads on our divers. Even the guys who run short leads, let's say it's 6 feet. In my opinion, you still have more control over that fish, even if it's 6 feet, by grabbing the line, kind of hand lining in while the other guy nets it. Even if it's only 2 pulls, you have more control over it than when your rod tip's way up here, the diver's wailing around 10 feet above your head, and that fish can still go anywhere he wants to. Not to mention you're pulling his head up out of the water where he can thrash like that. That's going to make him thrash. So even if it's 6 feet, what I would do, let's say there's even only 2 of you, the guy reeling in the fish is going to back up just so the other guy can grab right behind the diver. He's either going to set that rod straight up and down in a holder, you can set it down. That fish isn't going to rip the line out of the boat. And just have that guy pull it in while the guy that had the rod in his hand now just grabs the net. Boom, it's right there. You're ready to net it. That fish can't go anywhere. He lost all its leverage. Now that specifically is even, a better idea once you start getting in the 8, 10, 12 feet. Those guys that still don't hand line, but they have these longer diver leaders. Now we have 12 feet behind our diver. Now we're way up. If we're a small boat, we're way up in the front of our boat and everything's flailing around and I'm asking if he got him and I can't see anything and I can't help him. But if I'm reeling that fish in and my buddy grabs the line right behind the diver or the diver itself, I can set that rod and my diver holder that's just now straight up and down, he's hand lining it in, just, a couple, 2, 3 pulls. I grab the net right beside him, bang, done, it's over. I still think that's a better way than lifting that rod up high in the air and losing any leverage you have. And obviously, if you're a long diver leader guy, 15, 20, even further than that, you're hand lining anyway, and you've already, eliminated any of this stuff I'm talking about. So the best way I can paint this with words in a little better better way is if I'm walking my dog and there's another dog on the other side of the street, and I have one of those retractable leashes and my dog is, at the end of mine is 20 feet away and they start barking at each other. Well, now I need to get leverage back on my dog. So in order to pull mine away from the other dog, what am I going to do? Am I going to lock it in and like move my body and run backwards? Or am I going to try to get up as close to that dog as I can and get it, 3, 4, 5 feet away? So now he can only move 3 or 4 or 5 feet at a time. If he's 20 feet away, just like a dog tied to a tree, he's got that whole circumference that he can go in any which direction. And it's the same thing with a fish. Just because you think that fish is tired or, going to come in and be easy, most of the time they're not. And that circumference that you have at 20 feet, now he can go anywhere. But if that circumference is down here in 3 feet, he is very much limited to where he can go. That's probably my number one pet peeve out of anything, but we'll leave it at that. Then when it comes to netting, I see a lot of guys just kind of lay the net in the water and let that bag drag back behind the hoop. I think that's a no-brainer on why you don't want to do that. The first thing that's going to hit the fish is going to be the net, going to catch the hooks, and that's going to be the end of that. The only other thing with netting is guys get excited, myself included sometimes, and they try to get it when it's just a little bit too far out there. You're full extension, and you didn't wait that extra second or two, so you had enough room to kind of dive down, get underneath the fish, and lift back up. You can't lift up as fast and as strong when you're at full extension as you can when your elbows are bent right here. Getting down towards the end of the list, the last two I'm going to say are the two most, I don't want to say most important, but I feel like most overlooked things. But before I get there, one other one is don't get excited and grab two poles with fish on at the same time. So if you're already reeling one in and another pole gets bit, it doesn't do you any good to have one pole that you're already reeling in this hand and run over there and grab another pole with this hand. Now you have two fish, one in each hand, and you can't reel, loosen the drag, tighten the drag, any of the above on either one. You're completely useless. I guarantee you that rod holder will fight the second fish until someone gets it better than you can. I've already mentioned kind of the no crazy beads thing, so I'll let you go back and watch the last video if you want to know more about that. I just think mixing and matching sizes and crazy colors and different kinds of beads is not beneficial. Let speed and direction be your friend. Speed and direction are very important, and don't go crazy with taking off all your lures you have the most confidence in. Yes, you want to change lures, but don't just go wholesale and take everything off. Change your speed, change your direction first, see if you can't figure it out, because if you do change all your lures and now you have stuff you don't have confidence in, maybe you hasn't caught fish before, and when you do find that magic speed and direction, you're probably not going to get as many of the bites, or maybe not get any bites, because it was really a speed and direction thing and not a color thing. So these last two. Now we're to the last two. This one might be a little controversial, but I fish on 4 boats on the regular, every single week, and I've fished on a lot of boats in the past, and I've lost a lot of probes. So what I'm going to speak on is fish hawk probes. Everybody wants to know how fast you're going, and they give you a fish hawk speed from their probe. Those are not interchangeable speeds. They all do not come out of the package the same. Some people have them calibrated, some people don't. Calibrate, you can literally go right outside your harbor where you think there's the least amount of current and calibrate it to your GPS speed. So if you're going 2.4, you can calibrate your probe, the transducer, and the actual probe to 2.4, so it matches up per se. But they don't come out of the package the same. Most of them are really close. We lost a probe last year or the year before on one of our boats, and we got a new one. Normally you're in that low 2s range probably with a probe. This one out of the package, it reads 3.5 to 3.7, just what it does. They don't all come, that's just an example. I've seen it a million times. They don't all come out of the package the same. They're close, but if you're asking me what speed I'm going, and I'm going 2.1, well, we might be side by side, but your probe might say it's 2.2 or 2.3. In reality, those tenths matter, and sometimes it's not even as close as tenths. So you should be comparing GPS speed not probe speed. And now when I speak about probe speed, I'm speaking about fish hawk, because I don't use the other probe manufacturers, and that's not a knock on fish hawk at all. You know, you can look on their website. It basically says this is a repeatable number. It's not a same across all number. It's made to be a repeatable number for you, and that's exactly what it is. But if I'm asking you a speed, I want to know your GPS speed, because that, or GPS or speed over ground, whatever you want to call it, that on my boat and your boat is going to be using the same exact satellites. It's going to be exactly the same. If you're going 2.4 on your probe, sure, great. It might not be 2.4 for me, but if you're going 2.6 on your GPS, 2.6 on my GPS is going to be identical to that. And then I can, you know, whatever my probe says. It doesn't matter what the number is. It's basically to go back there to repeat. So if you give me a 2.6 on your GPS, I can get that exact speed, where a probe isn't going to give me the exact same speed. And you can ask your buddy, go side by side. There will be tenths different, you know, 1 or 2 tenths. Just something to keep an eye on. And I truly believe GPS speed and direction are the two things you want to ask, and not probe speed. Probe speed is for repeatability for yourself. The last one is, don't try and fish someone else's program. It's been proven by every angler ever that it just doesn't work very well. Everybody does things a little bit different. You know, going back to the last video, is it leader length? Is it this? Is it that? It's hard to ask every single question about every single variable. You know, why are they catching them? Well, it's probably because of the whole spread that they have. It's not just 1 or 2 poles that are catching fish. It's the whole balance of where they have everything located in the water is the reason why they're catching them. I fish all around the top half of the lake. My program per se doesn't change when I'm in Sheboygan or Sturgeon Bay or Frankfurt or wherever I am. It doesn't change. I'm running my same program, my same baits. And those are vastly different from going over to Michigan and what those guys are running. That's all spin doctors and meat and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Where that stuff isn't in my program. That doesn't mean I'm going to go over there and that's the only thing they bite on. They're the same fish. They're the same lake. The only thing that might factor into that is some water clarity, and that goes back to colors. But if you're, you know, within a couple miles of somebody, or even, you know, like I'm fishing in 100 feet and I'm not catching them, and I call Joe and he's like, yeah, I'm in 250 and I'm really getting them. Odds are you can go there and try to run that same program, and it's A, going to be either too late by the time you get there, or B, you're not going to be able to replicate it. My first thing would be to ask Joe, you know, what his speed and direction are, and try to get that going from where I'm at with my own baits. Very rarely does it actually work where Joe or whoever can give you his program and you're going to be able to get there in time and have it work. If I am going to move a few miles, and in this case, you know, I'm going to go out by Joe, I've got the necessary information. I got his speed, his GPS speed, his heading. Now I'm going to go out there, but I'm not going to try to replicate his program. I'm still going to do what I have confidence in, what I do best, my baits, all the rest. No two baits are created equal. Just because he may be whacking them on a bloody nose, that doesn't mean my bloody nose is going to work. I've kind of addressed that in the last video too. You can go out there and fish in that same area as him, but fish it in your way. Don't try to just, you know, pretend that you're on Joe's boat and make everything the same. That generally doesn't work. If you go out there and fish your own program, as long as you have speed and direction, that's what's going to give you the most success. So that's a lot of my do not do these things. Most of them are, you know, kind of personal or just don't make sense to do for me. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. That's not what this channel, page, whatever you want to call it, is all about. I'm not here to sell you on one way of fishing. I'm here to bring some things to light and let you think about it however you want. A couple of these things I'm going to try to post maybe a picture in with this video in there so I can kind of draw it out and show you a little better when it comes to kind of netting and leverage and all that stuff. But But other than that, if you have any questions, topics you want to see, drop them in the comments. Find us on Facebook, Real Action Charters, MVP Sport Fishing. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one.